Welcome back to Somnus Sagas, where the gentle currents of history carry us through the quiet hours of night. I'm your narrator for this evening's journey into the joy and wonder of bygone celebrations. Tonight, we'll explore the festivals and ceremonies that once brought light to the darkest seasons, laughter to the hardest times, and community to scattered souls across the ancient world. As you settle comfortably into your bed, allow your mind to wander back through the centuries with me. We'll visit Roman streets alive with the chaos of Saturnalia, medieval villages celebrating the mysterious Feast of Fools, and ancient groves where our ancestors welcomed spring with dances older than written memory. These celebrations, now lost to time, reveal the universal human need for joy, connection, and meaning in the cycle of seasons and life. Close your eyes and let your breathing slow as we begin this gentle exploration of humanity's forgotten festivals. Each celebration we discover tonight carried within it the hopes and dreams of entire communities, their rituals weaving together the sacred and the playful, the solemn and the joyous, in ways that modern life has largely forgotten. These were not mere entertainments, but vital expressions of the human spirit. Moments when ordinary people could step outside the constraints of daily life and touch something eternal and magical. In their stories, we find echoes of our own deepest longings for celebration, community, and wonder. Let the soft shadows of history embrace you as we journey together through these lost worlds of festival and feast, where every season brought its own magic and every community had its own way of celebrating the gift of being alive. In the depths of Roman winter, when the Mediterranean sun hung low and weak in the sky, the greatest empire in history would turn completely upside down for 7 glorious days. This was Saturnalia, a festival so beloved and transformative that its echoes still resonate in our modern celebrations. Picture Rome in December of 50 CE. The city's 1 million inhabitants are preparing for the most anticipated celebration of the year. In grand villas and humble apartments alike, families decorate their homes with evergreen boughs and light oil lamps to drive back the winter darkness. The air fills with the scent of pine, spiced wine, and roasting meats. Saturnalia officially begins on December 17th with a ceremony at the Temple of Saturn in the Roman Forum. The priest removes the woolen bonds from Saturn's statue, symbolically freeing the god to rule once more. This moment of religious reverence quickly gives way to extraordinary social transformation. For 7 days, Roman society's rigid hierarchies dissolve into joyful chaos. Masters serve meals to their slaves, who speak freely and even mock their owners without punishment. Senators don freedmen's caps and join street celebrations alongside plebeians. Children stay up late, play forbidden games, and receive gifts. Imagine Marcus, a stern paterfamilias who normally rules his household with iron discipline. During Saturnalia, he wears his slave's tunic, while his Greek servant Apollodorus reclines on the dining couch, wearing Marcus's best toga. The slave orders wine, and Marcus obeys with good humor, knowing this temporary reversal strengthens social order by providing safe outlet for tensions. Rome's streets become stages for impromptu performances and parades. Professional actors mingle with amateur entertainers as the city echoes with music and laughter. Dice games, normally restricted by law, are played openly in the forum. Citizens gamble while children play with wax dolls and toy soldiers received as gifts. The traditional feast is a marvel of excess and inclusivity. Tables groan under roasted peacocks, honeyed cakes, and amphoras of finest wines. Rich and poor sit together, sharing food and stories. The meal begins with Io Saturnalia and continues with drinking games, riddles, and elaborate toasts. Each household chooses a Saturnalicus princeps, or lord of misrule, often by lot, to serve as mock king. This temporary ruler issues absurd commands that must be obeyed, ordering senators to sing bawdy songs, commanding matrons to dance in streets, or requiring soldiers to dress as women and perform comic skits. Gift-giving was both charming and democratizing. Simple presents were exchanged: pottery figurines called sigillaria, wax candles, and small coins for luck. Even the poorest Romans could participate, as the thought mattered more than cost. Wealthy patrons were especially generous to clients, creating temporary wealth redistribution. Roman poets celebrated Saturnalia in verse. Catullus called it the best of days, while Seneca described it as when the whole city goes mad with pleasure. Even stern Pliny, the Younger, admitted enjoying the festival's pleasant derangement of ordinary life. As Christianity spread, Church Fathers initially condemned Saturnalia as pagan debauchery. However, they recognized that eliminating such a beloved celebration would be futile. Instead, they adapted its customs to Christian purposes, moving Christ's birth celebration to December 25th and incorporating gift-giving, feasting, and charitable traditions. The last imperial celebrations occurred in the late 4th century CE, as Christian emperors suppressed pagan festivals. Yet the human impulse to celebrate light's return in winter's darkness proved stronger than any decree. Saturnalia's joy, generosity, and temporary suspension of hierarchies lived on in new forms. Deep in medieval Europe's heart, during the long cold days between Christmas and Epiphany, the most sacred spaces in Christendom would witness one of history's most remarkable celebrations. The Feast of Fools transformed solemn cathedrals into stages for comedy, lower clergy into temporary bishops, and religious ritual into joyous parody. Let us visit Notre Dame in Paris during January 1245. The great Gothic arches that normally echo with Gregorian chant now ring with laughter and mock sacred songs. What we witness here would shock modern sensibilities, but was considered essential to medieval spiritual and social health. The celebration begins with electing a boy bishop or abbot of unreason from among the youngest clergy. Often a child of 10 or 12 years old, he is dressed in full episcopal regalia and treated with exaggerated reverence throughout the festival. The mock bishop delivers sermons filled with wordplay, jokes, and gentle satire of church hierarchy, while real bishops sit in the congregation, expected to receive these comic homilies with good humor. Brother Thomas, chosen as this year's boy bishop, processes through the cathedral wearing robes far too large for his small frame. The adult clergy follow behind, some walking backward, others wearing vestments inside out. The cathedral canons, normally among Paris's most dignified men, have painted their faces with soot and wine dregs, transforming themselves into grotesque but harmless demons. The liturgy turns sacred ritual into sacred comedy. The Mass is sung off-key and sometimes backward. Instead of incense, thuribles might be filled with pudding or old shoes, creating clouds of absurd smoke. Readings come from comic poets rather than scripture, though they often contain sharp social commentary disguised as entertainment. During sermons, the boy bishop might playfully scold real authorities for their foibles, creating temporary space where criticism could be voiced safely through humor. Social hierarchy transforms temporarily. Stable boys might find themselves seated in bishops' chairs, while abbots serve as altar boys. The cathedral treasurer, normally guarding the church's wealth, might be ordered by the boy bishop to distribute coins to the poor gathered in the nave. Kitchen servants could find themselves leading processions while archdeacons follow behind carrying pots and pans instead of sacred vessels. The feast following the mock service is legendary for its abundance and chaos. Long tables are set up in the cathedral nave, where clergy and lay people feast together on the finest foods the monastery can provide. Usual rules about fasting and dietary restrictions are suspended, and wine flows freely. Entertainment includes juggling priests, singing monks performing comic ballads, and elaborate skits that gently mock religious and secular authority. Music plays a central role, but it's music turned upside down. Gregorian chants receive humorous new lyrics commenting on local events or personalities. Sacred polyphony is replaced with drinking songs and folk melodies. Some cathedrals feature ass masses, where the congregation brays like donkeys instead of singing Amen, commemorating the donkey that carried Christ into Jerusalem, while celebrating the wisdom of humble creatures. Costumes and disguises were elaborate works of art. Clergy dressed as animals, peasants, women, or mythical creatures. Masks carved from wood or leather transformed familiar faces into fantastic beings. Some wore clothing made from kitchen utensils, creating armor from pots and pans. Others dressed as biblical characters with comic exaggerations. Moses with impossibly long beards, David with slings made from cathedral rope. The theological justification drew upon the biblical concept of divine reversal found in the Magnificat. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. Medieval theologians argued that by temporarily inverting social hierarchies, the celebration actually reinforced God's ultimate authority over all human pretensions. The festival served as a reminder that earthly power was temporary and true wisdom could be found in the mouths of babes and fools. As winter's grip finally loosened across the Celtic lands of ancient Europe, communities would prepare for one of their most important celebrations. Beltane, the great fire festival marking summer's beginning, transformed the landscape into a stage for rituals connecting earth and sky, human and divine, in a celebration of life's eternal renewal. Journey with me to a hillside in ancient Ireland, around 400 CE, as Celtic people prepare to welcome light and warmth's return. The date is April 30th, Beltane's Eve, and across the rolling green landscape, no fires burn. Every hearth, torch, and ember has been carefully extinguished, leaving the land in unusual darkness as communities gather for spring's most sacred night. Aoife, a young woman from a farming village, climbs the sacred hill with her family and neighbors as dusk approaches. She carries branches of rowan and hawthorn, their white blossoms bright against the darkening sky. These will become part of the great fire that will soon blaze at the hilltop, a beacon visible for miles around, and one of dozens dotting the countryside before dawn. The Druids, keepers of ancient wisdom and ritual knowledge, begin the ceremony as the last light fades from the western sky. They kindle the sacred fire using traditional methods, a fire plough of oak wood or flint struck against steel, creating sparks that catch in carefully prepared tinder of dried moss and birch bark. This new fire represents the sun's return to power, the victory of light over darkness, life over death. As flames leap higher, fed by fragrant wood offerings from the community, the celebration truly begins. Young people dance around the fire in spirals that mirror the sun's path across the sky. Their movements are both joyous and sacred, connecting them to the season's rhythm and renewal's eternal cycle. Some dancers wear crowns of spring flowers, primroses, violets, and wild garlic blossoms, while others have painted their faces with natural pigments that glow in the firelight. Aoife joins the line of young women and men who leap over smaller fires kindled from the main blaze. Each leap is both a prayer for good fortune and a test of courage. Those who clear the flames cleanly will enjoy good luck in love and prosperity in the coming year. Couples hold hands as they jump together, their success interpreted as an omen for their relationship's future. The cattle, essential to the community's survival, play a central role in Beltane rituals. The villagers drive their herds between two large fires in a ceremony called seining, a purification ritual believed to protect the animals from disease and ensure their fertility in the coming season. The smoke and heat are thought to burn away any lingering winter ailments and evil influences that might threaten the livestock. As night deepens, other ancient customs unfold around the hilltop fire. Young people slip away in pairs to gather flowers and greenery in the woods, engaging in courtship rituals as old as humanity itself. The night of Beltane is traditionally a time when normal social restrictions are relaxed, and many marriages begun this night will be celebrated later in the year. The decoration of the community with fresh greenery is perhaps Beltane's most visible tradition. Before dawn, groups of celebrants visit every house, barn and sacred site, adorning them with hawthorn branches, primroses and rowan sprigs. These decorations serve both aesthetic and protective purposes, believed to guard against harmful spirits and bring good fortune to all who dwell within. The May tree, known in some regions as the maypole, stands at the center of many Beltane celebrations. This tall wooden pole, often cut from birch or oak, is decorated with ribbons, flowers, and sometimes food offerings. The dancing around the May tree creates intricate patterns as ribbons weave together, symbolizing the interconnectedness of all life and the community's unity in celebration. As Christianity gradually spread across Celtic lands, Beltane faced increasing opposition from new religious authorities. Yet echoes survived in folk traditions that persist today. Morris dancing, May Day parades, and the crowning of May Queens all trace their origins to these ancient fire festivals, reminding us that some traditions touch something so fundamental in human nature that they transcend any particular religious or cultural system. In ancient Athens, as winter gradually yielded to spring's gentle warmth, citizens would prepare for one of their most unusual and complex celebrations. The Anthesteria, lasting 3 days in late February or early March, combined the joy of new wine and spring flowers with the solemn responsibility of honoring the restless dead. This festival reveals the ancient Greek understanding that life and death, celebration and remembrance were inseparably intertwined. Let us visit Athens in 420 BCE, during the classical period's height, as the city prepares for the Anthesteria. The festival's name comes from anthemon, meaning flower, for this is the season when the first blooms appear on the hills surrounding the city, and the new wine from the previous autumn's harvest is finally ready to drink. Thalia, a young Athenian woman, begins her preparations by gathering early spring flowers from the countryside outside the city walls. She collects crocuses, anemones, and the first tender herb shoots that will decorate her home and serve as offerings to the gods. Her husband Philippos has spent days preparing amphorae of new wine, the vintage that has been fermenting through the winter months and now must be opened and tasted for the first time. The first day of Anthesteria is called Pythogia, or jar opening. At dawn, the sound of breaking seals echoes throughout Athens as wine merchants, tavern keepers, and private citizens open their storage vessels to taste the new vintage. This is both practical necessity to determine which wines are good and which have spoiled, and a sacred act, as the first cup is always poured as a libation to Dionysus, god of wine, fertility, and transformation. Thalia watches as Philippos carefully removes the clay seal from their largest jar, his face anxious as he draws the first cup of wine. The liquid is cloudy and strong, with the wild, unrefined taste of wine that has not yet been aged or filtered. Despite its roughness, it represents hope and renewal, the transformation of simple grape juice into something that can gladden the heart and lift the spirit. The celebration quickly spreads throughout the city as citizens taste and share their new wine. Taverns throw open their doors, offering free samples to passers-by. Children run through the streets carrying small cups, begging for tastes of the precious liquid. Even slaves are given wine on this day, as the festival temporarily breaks down social barriers and creates a sense of shared abundance. The second day, called chews or pitchers, is perhaps the strangest of the three. It begins with a unique drinking contest held throughout the city. Participants sit in silence, each with a measured pitcher of new wine, competing to see who can drain their vessel fastest. Unlike typical symposiums where conversation flows as freely as wine, the chewies drinking must be done in complete silence, creating an eerie atmosphere that reflects the day's connection to the world of the dead. Young children play a special role in Cho's celebrations. 3-year-olds receive their first taste of wine mixed with honey and water, marking their formal introduction to one of life's sacred pleasures. They wear crowns of flowers and are carried through the streets by their parents, receiving blessings and small gifts from neighbors and relatives. But Choi's carries a darker undercurrent. The Athenians believe that on this day, the spirits of the dead rise from the underworld and walk among the living. To protect their homes, families hang buckthorn branches over their doors and chew leaves of whitethorn, plants believed to ward off malevolent spirits. They also smear their doorposts with tar, creating a barrier that ghosts cannot cross. The third and final day, chitroi or pots, shifts the festival's focus from wine to food and remembrance. Citizens prepare a special dish called panspermia, a mixture of all kinds of seeds, grains, and legumes cooked together in large pots. This humble meal serves as an offering to Hermes Chtonios, the god who guides souls to the underworld, and to the spirits of ancestors who must be properly honored before they return to their realm. Preparing amphorae of new wine, the vintage that has been fermenting through the winter months, and now must be opened and tasted for the first time. The first day of Anthesteria is called Pythogia, or jar opening. At dawn, the sound of breaking seals echoes throughout Athens as wine merchants, tavern keepers, and private citizens open their storage vessels to taste the new vintage. This is both a practical necessity to determine which wines are good and which have spoiled, and a sacred act, as the first cup is always poured as a libation to Dionysus, god of wine, fertility, and transformation. Thalia watches as Philippos carefully removes the clay seal from their largest jar, his face anxious as he draws the first cup of wine. The liquid is cloudy and strong, with the wild, unrefined taste of wine that has not yet been aged or filtered. Despite its roughness, it represents hope and renewal, the transformation of simple grape juice into something that can gladden the heart and lift the spirit. The celebration quickly spreads throughout the city as citizens taste and share their new wine. Taverns throw open their doors, offering free samples to passers-by. Children run through the streets carrying small cups, begging for tastes of the precious liquid. Even slaves are given wine on this day, as the festival temporarily breaks down social barriers and creates a sense of shared abundance. The second day, called Chews or Pitchers, is perhaps the strangest of the three. It begins with a unique drinking contest held throughout the city. Participants sit in silence, each with a measured pitcher of new wine, competing to see who can drain their vessel fastest. Unlike typical symposiums where conversation flows as freely as wine, the Chews drinking must be done in complete silence, creating an eerie atmosphere that reflects the day's connection to the world of the dead. Young children play a special role in the Chews celebrations. 3-year-olds receive their first taste of wine, mixed with honey and water, marking their formal introduction to one of life's sacred pleasures. They wear crowns of flowers and are carried through the streets by their parents, receiving blessings and small gifts from neighbors and relatives. But Chois carries a darker undercurrent. The Athenians believe that on this day, the spirits of the dead rise from the underworld and walk among the living. To protect their homes, families hang buckthorn branches over their doors and chew leaves of whitethorn, plants believed to ward off malevolent spirits. They also smear their doorposts with tar, creating a barrier that ghosts cannot cross. The most mysterious aspect of Chois involves the sacred marriage ritual performed in the sanctuary of Dionysus. The wife of the Archon Basileus, one of Athens' highest officials, undergoes a secret ceremony representing her marriage to Dionysus himself. The details of this ritual are known only to initiates, but it symbolizes the community's relationship with the divine forces of fertility and renewal. Thalia finds the atmosphere of Chois both exciting and unsettling. The combination of celebration and fear, of wine and spirits, creates a mood unlike any other day of the year. She joins the crowds moving through the city, but she also hurries home before dark, aware that this night belongs as much to the dead as to the living. The third and final day, Kitroi or Pots, shifts the festival's focus from wine to food and remembrance. Citizens prepare a special dish called panspermia, a mixture of all kinds of seeds, grains, and legumes cooked together in large pots. This humble meal serves as an offering to Hermes Chthonios, the god who guides souls to the underworld, and to the spirits of ancestors who must be properly honored before they return to their realm. The panspermia is not consumed by the living, but left at crossroads, in cemeteries, and at household shrines as food for the hungry dead. Families visit the graves of their ancestors, pouring wine libations and leaving portions of the seed mixture, ensuring that their departed relatives are not forgotten and will rest peacefully for another year. Children play a particularly important role in Chitroi, as they are considered closest to the spirit world and most capable of communicating with the dead. They carry small pots of panspermia through the streets, singing ancient songs that are believed to guide lost spirits back to the underworld. Their innocent voices are thought to have special power to comfort both the living and the dead. As evening falls on the third day, the festival concludes with a ritual cleansing of the city. Citizens sweep their homes and businesses, symbolically removing any lingering presence of the dead. They ring bells and make loud noises to drive away any spirits who might try to remain in the world of the living. The phrase "outceres Anthesteria" is over. Echoes through the streets as the city prepares to return to normal life. The Anthesteria reveals the complex relationship ancient Greeks maintained with death and renewal. Unlike modern celebrations that focus purely on joy or mourning, this festival acknowledged that life contains both elements simultaneously. The new wine represented hope and vitality, while the presence of the dead reminded celebrants of life's fragility and the importance of honoring those who came before. This three-day celebration continued for centuries, adapting to changing political and religious circumstances, but maintaining its essential character. Even as Christianity spread through the Greek world, elements of the Anthesteria survived in folk traditions and seasonal customs, testament to its deep resonance with human needs for celebration, remembrance, and renewal. In the depths of Roman winter, when February's cold winds howled through the 7 hills and the city huddled beneath grey skies, one of Rome's oldest and wildest festivals would transform the eternal city into a scene of sacred chaos. Lupercalia, celebrated on February 15th, combined fertility rituals with purification ceremonies in ways that would both fascinate and shock observers, creating a celebration so powerful that it would influence courtship customs for millennia to come. Let us visit Rome in 44 BC, the year of Julius Caesar's assassination, as the city prepares for what would be one of the last great Lupercalia celebrations of the Republic. The festival's origins stretch back to Rome's legendary founding, connected to the she-wolf who nursed Romulus and Remus, and to the pastoral god Faunus, protector of flocks and fertility. The celebration begins at dawn in the Lupercal cave at the foot of the Palatine Hill, the sacred grotto where the wolf was said to have suckled Rome's founders. Here, members of 2 ancient religious colleges, the Luperci Fabiani and the Luperci Quintiliani, gather for rituals that blend sacrifice, purification, and controlled wildness in ways unique to Roman religion. Young Marcus Antonius, later to become one of history's most famous lovers, participates in the ceremony as a member of the Luperci. He watches as the priests sacrifice goats and a dog to Faunus, the god of fertility and shepherds. The choice of animals is significant. Goats represent fertility and sexual vigor, while the dog serves as a guardian spirit to protect the community from evil influences. The moment of sacrifice is followed by one of Rome's most unusual rituals. 2 young noblemen are led forward, and the priests daub their foreheads with the blood of the sacrificed goats, using the very knives that killed the animals. This blood is then wiped away with wool soaked in milk, and the young men are required to laugh, a sound that echoes through the sacred cave and is believed to ensure the fertility of the coming year. What happens next transforms the solemn religious ceremony into something approaching controlled chaos. The Luperci strip naked, except for goatskin loincloths cut from the sacrificed animals, and arm themselves with strips of goatskin called februar, from which the month of February takes its name. These leather thongs will serve as sacred whips for the most extraordinary procession in the Roman calendar. Marcus joins his fellow Luperci as they burst from the cave and begin running through the streets of Rome in a ritual circuit that will take them around the ancient boundary of the Palatine settlement. But this is no ordinary foot race. The naked young men run with deliberate purpose, striking out with their goatskin strips at everyone they encounter, particularly women who actively seek out their blows. The streets fill with excited crowds as word spreads that the Luperci are running. Roman matrons and young maidens position themselves along the route, offering their hands and backs to be struck by the sacred thongs. They believed that these ritual blows will cure sterility, ensure safe childbirth, and grant fertility to those hoping to conceive. Pregnant women especially seek out the runners, convinced that the goatskin strips will guarantee easy delivery and healthy children. Claudia, a young Roman matron who has been married for 3 years without bearing children, waits anxiously near the forum as the sound of running feet and excited shouts grows closer. When the Luperci appear, their bodies gleaming with sweat and blood, she pushes forward with other women, holding out her arms to receive the ritual strikes. The leather thongs sting her skin, but she welcomes the pain as a small price for the fertility she desperately desires. The religious significance of Lupercalia extends beyond individual fertility to encompass the purification and protection of the entire community. The running of the Luperci is believed to trace the original boundary of Rome, creating a sacred perimeter that guards the city against evil influences and ensures its continued prosperity. The month of February was traditionally Rome's season of purification, and Lupercalia served as the year's most important cleansing. The festival also serves as a matchmaking celebration that rivals any modern dating service. Young unmarried women write their names on pieces of parchment and place them in a large urn. Single men then draw names at random, creating couples who will court throughout the festival season and often beyond. Many marriages begin with these Lupercalia pairings, as the random selection is viewed as divinely inspired and particularly likely to result in fertile unions. The feasting that follows the ritual running is legendary for its abundance and revelry. Tables are set up throughout the city, laden with the finest foods Rome can provide. Roasted meats from the sacrificial animals, fresh bread, fruits preserved from the previous autumn, and wine from the best vintages. The normal social hierarchies that govern Roman life are temporarily relaxed, allowing patricians and plebeians to feast together in celebration of their shared humanity. Music and dancing continue late into the night, with traditional songs that celebrate fertility, love, and the return of spring. Some of these songs are so ancient that their meanings have been partially lost, but their melodies and rhythms remain potent expressions of human joy and desire. Young couples dance together for the first time, while established families celebrate their children and hope for continued blessings. The political dimensions of Lupercalia become particularly evident during our visit in 44 BCE. Marcus Antonius, in his role as a Lupercus, will later that day offer Julius Caesar a diadem during the festival, an act that some interpret as testing the dictator's royal ambitions. Caesar's refusal of the crown becomes part of the complex political drama that will lead to his assassination just 1 month later, showing how these ancient religious festivals intertwined with the highest levels of Roman politics. As Christianity gradually spread through the Roman Empire, Lupercalia faced increasing opposition from church authorities who viewed its fertility rituals and nudity as incompatible with Christian morality. Pope Gelasius I officially banned the festival in 496 CE, but its influence persisted in various forms. Some scholars believe that Valentine's Day, celebrated on February 14th, preserves elements of Lupercalia's matchmaking traditions, though transformed into a more modest and Christian-appropriate form. The last recorded Lupercalia celebrations occurred in the 5th century CE, victims of Christianity's growing influence and the general decline of traditional Roman religion. Yet the festival's emphasis on fertility, purification, and romantic pairing touch something so fundamental in human nature that its themes continue to resurface in new cultural forms throughout European history. In the heart of winter, when December's darkness seems to swallow the ancient city of Lyon, France, an extraordinary tradition transforms every window, balcony, and street corner into a canvas of light. The Fête des Lumières, though still celebrated today, carries echoes of a medieval tradition so beloved that it survived wars, revolutions, and centuries of change to become one of Europe's most magical winter celebrations. Let us journey to Lyon in December of 1643, during Louis XIV's reign, as the city prepares for a celebration that began 3 centuries earlier as a desperate prayer for divine intervention. The tradition's origins lie in the devastating plague of 1348, when Lyon city leaders made a solemn vow to the Virgin Mary. If she would spare their city from the Black Death's ravages, they would honor her with an annual offering of light and devotion. Marie Claire, a candle maker in the old city, has spent weeks preparing for this night. Her workshop overflows with candles of every size and description: simple tallow candles for the poor, elegant beeswax tapers for the wealthy, and special devotional candles decorated with religious symbols. Every household in Lyon will need candles tonight, for tradition demands that no window remain dark during the festival. As December 8th approaches, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, the entire city becomes involved in preparation. Children help their parents clean windows until they sparkle, while adults prepare special glass lanterns and candle holders that will safely contain the flames throughout the long night. The more prosperous citizens commission elaborate illuminated displays, while the poor save their coins to ensure they can afford at least a few simple candles. The Cathedral of Saint-Jean, Lyon's ancient mother church, serves as the focal point for the celebration. Here, city officials gather for a solemn ceremony that begins with the lighting of a great candle from the altar flame. This sacred fire will be carried throughout the city, lighting the first candle in each district, which in turn lights others until the entire metropolis glows with warm, golden light. Marie Claire joins the procession that winds through Lyon's narrow medieval streets, carrying her family's candles to be blessed by the priests. The ceremony is both deeply religious and wonderfully communal, as neighbors who rarely speak to each other throughout the year share in the collective effort to create something beautiful and meaningful. Children sing traditional carols while their parents arrange candles in windows with artistic care. As darkness falls on December 8th, the transformation begins. One by one, candles appear in windows throughout the city. What starts as scattered points of light gradually becomes a constellation that rivals the stars above. Every building, from the grandest merchants' houses to the humblest workers' cottages, participates in creating Lyon's luminous tribute to the Virgin Mary and celebration of light's victory over darkness. The effect is breathtaking in its simple beauty. The Saône and Rhône rivers reflect thousands of candle flames, doubling the illumination and creating the impression that the entire city floats on liquid light. The medieval streets, usually dark and dangerous after sunset, become safe passages where neighbors meet to admire each other's displays and share in the collective wonder. Families have developed their own traditions within the larger celebration. Some create elaborate arrangements in their windows, using mirrors to multiply the candlelight and colored glass to cast rainbow patterns on stone walls. Others focus on quantity, filling every available window space with simple candles that burn like stars in the winter night. The religious processions that wind through the city during the evening hours are spectacles of devotion and community pride. Priests carry ornate lanterns containing blessed candles, while choirs sing ancient hymns that echo off the medieval buildings. Citizens line the streets holding their own candles, creating rivers of light that flow through Lyon's ancient neighborhoods. What makes Lyon's Festival of Lights particularly remarkable is its democratic nature. Unlike many religious celebrations that center on the wealthy or powerful, this festival requires participation from every household to achieve its full effect. The poorest families contribute their simple candles alongside the elaborate displays of merchants and nobles, creating a genuine community celebration that transcends social boundaries. The tradition weathered the French Revolution, when religious celebrations were officially banned, by transforming into a more secular celebration of light and community. Even during the darkest periods of French history, Lyon's citizens found ways to maintain their luminous December tradition, adapting it to changing political circumstances while preserving its essential spirit. The Imperial Hunt. Legends of Ancient Chinese Hunting. Chapter 1. The Yellow Emperor's Chase, 2697 BCE. The morning mist clung to the Yellow River Valley like silk veils as Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor, raised his bronze-tipped spear toward the rising sun. Around him, 1,000 warriors waited in perfect silence, their lacquered leather armor gleaming with dew, their composite bows strung and ready. This was no ordinary hunt. This was the great hunt of the bear, a ritual that would establish the divine mandate of China's first legendary emperor. The bear they sought was no common beast, but a creature of legend, white as winter snow, large as a small house, with eyes like burning coals and claws that could rend iron. Local shamans claimed it was the earthly manifestation of the constellation Ursa Major, descended to test the worthiness of those who would rule the Middle Kingdom. For 3 moons, the Great Bear had terrorized villages along the river, destroying crops and carrying off livestock with supernatural strength. Huangdi's chief huntsman, a weathered veteran named Kang Jie, who would later be credited with inventing Chinese writing, approached on silent feet. His knowledge of animal behavior was legendary. It was said he could read the thoughts of beasts in their tracks, understand the language of birds, and predict the movements of prey days before they themselves knew where they would go. Tianzi, Kang Jie whispered, using the title Son of Heaven that would echo through millennia of Chinese imperial history. The bear has moved upstream during the night. Its tracks show it carries a wound, likely from the spears of the Yan tribe warriors who died attempting to kill it. It seeks the sacred grove where the spirits of the ancestors dwell, believing their power will heal its injury. The Yellow Emperor nodded, his eyes never leaving the distant tree line where autumn leaves painted the mountainside in shades of gold and crimson. The symbolic importance of this hunt extended far beyond the killing of a single animal. In ancient Chinese cosmology, the emperor's ability to hunt successfully demonstrated his harmony with the natural order, his fitness to serve as the bridge between heaven and earth. Summon the shamans, Huangdi commanded. Let them perform the ritual of calling. If this bear truly carries the spirit of the Great Bear constellation, we must approach it with the proper ceremonies, or risk bringing down the wrath of heaven itself. The ritual that followed would become the template for imperial hunts throughout Chinese history. Drums, made from the skin of sacred animals, beat in rhythm with the heartbeats of the assembled hunters. Incense burned in bronze tripods, sending smoke signals to alert the gods of their intentions. The shamans, their faces painted with symbols representing the four directions, chanted invocations that were said to speak directly to the souls of the animals they sought. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, the hunt began in earnest. This was not the chaotic charge of barbarian raiders, but the disciplined advance of a civilization that had already mastered bronze working, silk weaving, and the complex art of government. The hunters moved in coordinated formations, each knowing his role in the elaborate dance of pursuit and capture. The beaters, young men chosen for their speed and courage, advanced through the underbrush, making noise to drive the quarry toward the waiting nets and spears of the main hunting party. Behind them came the trackers, reading signs invisible to untrained eyes. A bent twig here, a tuft of white fur there, the faint scent of musk that clung to the morning air. When the great bear finally appeared, crashing through a stand of bamboo with earth-shaking roars, even veterans of countless hunts fell silent in awe. The beast stood nearly 12 feet tall on its hind legs, its white fur marked with scars from previous encounters with human hunters. Its eyes, red as rubies, fixed on the yellow emperor with an intelligence that seemed almost human. For a moment that stretched into eternity, emperor and bear regarded each other across the clearing. In that gaze, ancient Chinese observers would later claim, lay the entire future of their civilization. The understanding that humanity's relationship with nature must be one of respect rather than mere domination, of harmony rather than conquest. The battle that followed became the stuff of legend, told and retold around winter fires for thousands of years. The great bear charged with the force of an avalanche, but the Yellow Emperor's hunters had prepared for this moment with meticulous care. Nets woven from silk and strengthened with bronze wire entangled the beast's legs, while dozens of spears, thrown with precision born of years of training, found their marks. Yet it was Huangdi himself who delivered the killing blow. A bronze-headed spear thrust deep into the bear's heart, while looking directly into its eyes. A gesture of respect that acknowledged the nobility of his quarry, even as he claimed victory over it. As the great bear fell, its final roar echoing across the valley, the watching shamans proclaimed that heaven had confirmed the Yellow Emperor's right to rule. The feast that followed lasted 7 days and established many of the traditions that would govern Chinese imperial hunts for the next 4 millennia. The bear's meat was distributed according to strict protocols that reflected social hierarchy, with the choicest portions reserved for the emperor and his closest advisors. The hide would be fashioned into a ceremonial robe, worn only during the most important state occasions. Most significantly, the bear's spirit was honored with elaborate rituals designed to ensure its peaceful transition to the afterlife. This first great hunt established principles that would define Chinese attitudes toward hunting throughout the imperial age. The necessity of proper ritual, the importance of demonstrating imperial virtue through success in the field, and the understanding that the natural world existed in delicate harmony with human civilization. The Yellow Emperor had not merely killed a dangerous animal. He had proven his divine mandate to rule by mastering the forces of nature through wisdom, courage, and proper respect for the cosmic order. Chapter 2. The Duke's Forest, Spring and Autumn Period, 722 to 481 BCE. The bronze bells of Lu rang across the morning air as Duke Zhuang prepared for the spring hunt that would demonstrate his kingdom's prosperity to the assembled nobility of the Zhou realm. Unlike the legendary hunts of the distant past, This expedition represented the sophisticated military and social organization that characterized the spring and autumn period, an age when hunting had evolved from survival necessity into elaborate pageantry that served multiple political functions. In the armory of the ducal palace, master craftsmen put final touches on weapons that represented the pinnacle of Bronze Age technology. Composite bows, their wooden cores reinforced with horn and sinew, could drive arrows through armor at distances that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations. Bronze-tipped spears, perfectly balanced for both mounted and foot combat, gleamed with intricate decorations that told the stories of their makers' families. Most impressive were the war chariots, two-wheeled vehicles drawn by carefully bred horses, carrying crews trained from childhood in the complex art of mobile warfare. Duke Zhuang himself embodied the martial ideal of his age. At 35, he had already proven his worth in battles against the rival states of Qi and Wei, earning a reputation for both personal courage and strategic brilliance. His participation in the hunt served multiple purposes: training his soldiers in coordinated tactics, demonstrating his kingdom's military strength to potential enemies, and reinforcing the social bonds that held feudal society together. The hunting party that assembled in the palace courtyard would have impressed even the legendary Yellow Emperor. 300 chariots carried the cream of Lu's nobility, each vehicle representing a substantial investment in bronze, leather, and horseflesh. Behind them marched 2,000 infantry armed with crossbows, a relatively new weapon that was revolutionizing Chinese warfare by allowing common soldiers to achieve accuracy previously limited to aristocratic archers trained from birth. The target of this massive expedition was the great forest that stretched along Lu's northern border, a wilderness that served as refuge for bandits and wild animals alike. Recent reports spoke of a tiger of unusual size and ferocity that had killed several woodcutters and threatened the trade routes connecting Lu to its allies. The symbolic importance of destroying this threat could hardly be overstated. The ability to protect his subjects from wild beasts was one of the fundamental responsibilities of legitimate rulership. Confucius himself, then a young man serving in the ducal administration, watched the departure from the palace steps. The philosopher, who would later transform Chinese thought, was already developing the ideas about proper government and social harmony that would influence the kingdom for thousands of years. Years later, he would write about this hunt in his historical records, seeing in its elaborate organization a reflection of the cosmic order that should govern all human affairs. "Observe," the future sage murmured to his companion Yan Hui, "how each element of this expedition serves the greater harmony. The Duke demonstrates his virtue through courage, the nobles prove their loyalty through service, and the common soldiers learn discipline through shared endeavor. This is how society should function, each person fulfilling their proper role in service to the common good." The hunt began with ceremonies that had evolved considerably since the Yellow Emperor's time. Taoist priests, their robes embroidered with symbols representing the 5 elements, performed divination rituals using heated turtle shells and bronze coins. The patterns of cracks and the fall of coins revealed heaven's will regarding the expedition's prospects, or at least the priests interpreted them in ways that supported the Duke's political objectives. Music played a crucial role in these proceedings. The court orchestra, using bronze bells, stone chimes, and bamboo flutes, performed compositions that were believed to harmonize the hunters' spirits with the natural rhythms of the forest. Each melody corresponded to specific types of game and hunting techniques, creating an elaborate system of musical magic that reinforced the expedition's ritual significance. The forest they entered was a world unto itself. Ancient oaks and chestnuts whose trunks required a dozen men to encircle. Undergrowth so thick that sunlight barely penetrated to the forest floor. And streams that ran dark and silent between moss-covered banks. This was not the cultivated landscape of farms and villages, but primordial China, the wilderness that had covered the land before human civilization imposed its order upon the natural world. The taiga they sought had claimed a territory covering dozens of square miles, marking its boundaries with claw marks on tree trunks and the remnants of its kills. Local hunters described a beast of extraordinary intelligence that seemed to anticipate human tactics, always staying one step ahead of attempts to trap or corner it. Some whispered that this was no ordinary animal, but a shape-shifting demon that had taken tiger form to plague the human world. The Duke's strategy reflected the military innovations of his era. Rather than attempting to corner the tiger directly, he deployed his forces in a coordinated sweep that would gradually contract like a noose, driving the beast toward a predetermined killing ground where nets and spearmen waited in ambush. Mounted messengers carried orders between the various divisions, while horn calls and drum beats provided tactical coordination across miles of difficult terrain. For 3 days, the hunt continued with growing intensity. Smaller game, deer, wild boar, and foxes fell to the arrows and spears of the noble hunters, providing both food for the expedition and opportunities for young nobles to prove their skill and courage. But the great tiger remained elusive, its tracks leading the hunters deeper into the forest's heart where ancient spirits were said to dwell. The climax came at dawn on the 4th day, when the Duke's best trackers finally cornered the tiger in a ravine where a waterfall crashed down from the heights above. The beast that emerged from the morning mist exceeded every description, a magnificent creature whose orange and black stripes seemed to flicker like flames, whose eyes held the accumulated wisdom of the wild, and whose roar shook leaves from the trees around the ravine. Duke Zhuang faced the tiger alone, as protocol demanded, armed only with a bronze-tipped spear and his own courage. The battle that followed became the subject of poems and songs that would be recited in the Lu court for generations. The tiger's charge was met by the Duke's perfectly timed spear thrust, but the weapon only wounded the beast, sending it into a frenzy of rage and pain that made it more dangerous than ever. In the end, victory came not through individual heroics, but through the coordinated action that had defined the entire expedition. As the wounded tiger prepared for a final charge, nets dropped from the trees above, while crossbow bolts flew from hidden positions around the ravine. The great cat died as it had lived, fighting fiercely against overwhelming odds, never surrendering until its final breath. The celebration that followed reinforced every aspect of Zhou dynasty social structure. The tiger's hide would adorn the Duke's throne room. Its bones would be ground into medicine for the court physicians, and its spirit would be honored in ceremonies designed to ensure the kingdom's continued prosperity. More importantly, the successful hunt demonstrated that Duke Zhuang possessed the virtue and capability necessary to protect his subjects from all threats, whether human or animal. As the expedition returned to the capital, villagers lined the roads to witness the triumphant procession. The tiger's carcass, displayed on a specially built cart, served as tangible proof of their ruler's power and heaven's continued favor toward the state of Lu. Children who saw that procession would tell their grandchildren about the day their duke killed the great tiger, and the story would become part of the shared cultural memory that bound the kingdom together. Chapter 3. The First Emperor's Grand Hunt, Qin Dynasty, 221 BCE. The earth trembled beneath 10,000 horses as Emperor Qin Shi Huang's hunting expedition assembled on the vast plains west of his new capital at Xianyang. This was no mere sporting event, but a demonstration of imperial power, designed to awe both subjects and foreign ambassadors with the unified might of China's first true empire. The scale of preparation had taken months, an entire army dedicated not to war, but to the pursuit of game in the emperor's newly established hunting preserve. The first emperor himself cut an imposing figure as he reviewed his assembled forces from atop the Afang Palace's highest tower. At 39, he had already achieved what no Chinese ruler before him had accomplished: the complete unification of the warring states under a single crown. Now, having conquered human enemies, he would demonstrate his mastery over the natural world through a hunt of unprecedented magnitude. Li Si, the emperor's chief minister and architect of China's new legal system, approached with the final preparations reports. The brilliant legalist philosopher had applied the same systematic thinking that had unified Chinese law and administration to organizing this imperial spectacle. Every detail had been calculated for maximum effect, from the precise timing of each phase of the hunt to the symbolic meaning of every animal they would pursue. Majesty, Li Si reported with the careful precision that had made him indispensable to the imperial administration. The hunting preserve has been prepared according to your specifications. 100,000 peasants have spent 6 months driving game from across 3 provinces into the designated area. The walls and barriers are complete. No beast will escape to spread word of weakness. No hunter will fail to find worthy quarry. The preserve itself was an artificial wilderness covering nearly 1,000 square miles, a vast enclosed area where every animal had been carefully catalogued and positioned for maximum dramatic effect. Tigers from the southern mountains shared the space with bears from the northern forests, while deer, elk, and wild boar provided opportunities for lesser members of the hunting party to prove their skills without risking imperial displeasure through failure. The weapons displayed for this expedition represented the pinnacle of warring states' military technology. The emperor's personal arsenal included crossbows of revolutionary design, bronze-triggered mechanisms that could drive iron bolts through armor at ranges exceeding 300 paces. His spears featured steel points forged using techniques recently perfected by imperial armorsmiths, while his composite bow had been crafted by master bowyers, whose family secrets had been jealously guarded for generations. Most impressive were the chariots, no longer the simple war vehicles of earlier eras, but elaborate ceremonial platforms decorated with gold, jade, and intricate carvings depicting the emperor's victories over both human and supernatural enemies. The horses drawing these magnificent vehicles had been bred specifically for imperial use. Their bloodlines traced back through generations of careful selective breeding that had produced animals of exceptional speed, strength, and beauty. The hunting party that assembled that morning numbered over 50,000 participants. Nobles from the conquered kingdoms, foreign ambassadors eager to curry favor with the new imperial court, and military commanders whose loyalty had been proven in the unification wars. Each group had its designated role in the elaborate choreography that would unfold over the following days. The ceremonial opening of the hunt followed rituals that combined traditions from all the former warring states, a deliberate demonstration of the emperor's ability to synthesize the best elements of Chinese culture under unified imperial rule. Shamans from the northern steppes performed alongside Confucian scholars from the central plains, while Taoist mystics from the southern mountains added their voices to invocations designed to ensure heaven's favor for the expedition. Master Meng, the court historian whose chronicles would preserve these events for posterity, watched the proceedings with the careful eye of a scholar, trained in the classical traditions. His records would note not just the events themselves, but their deeper significance as demonstrations of the mandate of heaven that justified Qin rule over the entire known world. "Observe," he would later write, "how His Majesty orders even the beasts of the field according to his will. As the Son of Heaven commands nature itself, so does his authority extend over all creation. The tiger bows to his spear, the bear yields to his arrows, and even the birds of the air fall silent before his divine presence." The hunt began with a coordinated advance that resembled nothing so much as a military campaign. Horns sounded across the preserve as thousands of beaters moved forward in perfect formation, driving game toward predetermined killing grounds where the emperor and his most favored nobles waited with weapons ready. The noise was tremendous, drums, gongs, and human voices combining to create a sound like thunder that rolled across the artificial wilderness. The first quarry to appear were the deer, hundreds of them streaming across the open ground in graceful bounds that seemed to mock gravity itself. The emperor's arrows found their marks with mechanical precision, each shot calculated to demonstrate not just accuracy, but the effortless superiority that befitted the ruler of all under heaven. Lesser nobles followed his lead, their success or failure carefully noted by court observers whose reports would influence future imperial favor. But the true test came when the great predators appeared, the tigers and bears that had been saved for the emperor's personal attention. These magnificent beasts, driven by the coordinated advance of the hunting party, emerged from cover with the desperate fury of creatures that knew they faced their final battle. The confrontations that followed became the stuff of legend, celebrated in poems and songs that would echo through Chinese literature for centuries to come. The emperor faced each animal with the calm confidence that had characterized his rise to power. His technique was flawless, the product of years of training under the finest masters in the empire, combined with natural ability that court flatterers attributed to divine favor. When a massive tiger charged across the killing ground, the emperor's crossbow bolt took it in the heart with surgical precision. When a great bear reared on its hind legs in final defiance, the emperor's spear found its mark without the slightest hesitation. The symbolic meaning of these kills was not lost on the assembled observers. Each fallen beast represented not just the emperor's physical prowess, but his spiritual authority over the natural world. In Chinese cosmology, the ability to hunt successfully demonstrated the ruler's harmony with the forces of heaven and earth, his fitness to serve as the bridge between the human and divine realms. The feast that concluded the hunt lasted for 7 days and established precedents that would govern imperial entertainments throughout Chinese history. The choicest portions of the slain animals were distributed according to strict protocols that reinforced social hierarchy while demonstrating imperial generosity. Foreign ambassadors received gifts of tiger skins and bear claws, tangible proof of their host's power to carry back to their own rulers. More importantly, the successful completion of the hunt provided legitimacy for the radical changes the emperor was imposing on Chinese civilization. The same systematic approach that had driven game into killing grounds was being applied to standardizing currency, writing systems, and legal codes across the empire. The message was clear. Just as the emperor could bend nature itself to his will, so could he reshape human society according to rational principles that would bring order to a world that had known only chaos. As the expedition prepared to return to Xianyang, the first emperor surveyed the thousands of carcasses that testified to his success. but his thoughts had already turned to greater hunts, the pursuit of the elixir of immortality that would allow him to rule forever, the conquest of barbarian lands beyond the Great Wall, and the creation of monuments that would ensure his fame throughout all eternity. The hunt had been merely practice for these grander ambitions. Chapter 4. The Han General's Winter Campaign, Han Dynasty, 134 BCE. Snow crunched beneath the hooves of Mongol ponies as General Wei Qing's expeditionary force made camp in the shadow of the Helen Mountains, 200 miles north of the Great Wall. This was no pleasure hunt for pampered courtiers, but a military campaign disguised as hunting. A winter expedition designed to train Han cavalry in the tactics they would need to defeat the Xiongnu Confederation that threatened China's northern borders. The general himself embodied the new type of Chinese military leader that had emerged under the Han Dynasty. Unlike the aristocratic commanders of earlier eras, Wei Qing had risen from humble origins through demonstrated ability on the battlefield. His understanding of mounted warfare had been learned not from classical military texts, but from years of fighting the very nomads whose tactics he now sought to master. Around the camp, 3,000 of the Empire's finest cavalry made final preparations for a hunt that would test both their skills and their endurance against the harsh realities of winter warfare. These were not the traditional Chinese soldiers of previous generations, but a new breed of warrior trained specifically for mobile operations against mounted enemies. Their equipment reflected this specialized role. Lighter armor for greater mobility, composite bows designed for use from horseback, and techniques borrowed from the very barbarians they had been sent to fight. Captain Huo Kubing, Wei Qing's nephew and protégé, approached the command tent with reports from the scouting parties that had spent weeks mapping the mountain valleys where their quarry waited. At barely 20, Huo Kubing had already earned a reputation as one of the Han army's most innovative tactical minds, combining traditional Chinese discipline with an intuitive understanding of nomadic warfare that seemed almost supernatural. "Uncle," he reported with the informal directness that characterized their relationship, "the scouts have located the main herds in the valley beyond the northern pass. Thousands of horses, wild and semi-wild, driven down from the high pastures by early snowfall. The Xiongnu raiders, who usually claim these animals, have withdrawn deeper into the steppes, leaving the herds unguarded. The horses they sought were not merely game animals, but strategic resources that could determine the outcome of the Han-Xiongnu conflict. The Chinese had learned through bitter experience that infantry armies, no matter how disciplined, could not effectively combat the mounted archers of the northern steppes. Victory required matching mobility with mobility, building cavalry forces that could pursue, engage, and defeat nomadic raiders on their own terms. The plan that Wei Qing had developed represented a synthesis of Chinese organizational skills with barbarian tactical innovations. Rather than attempting to hunt individual animals, his forces would execute coordinated sweeps designed to capture entire herds alive. The horses could then be broken and trained for military service, while the techniques learned in their capture would prepare Han cavalry for the more complex challenges of fighting human enemies who employed similar tactics. The cultural significance of this expedition extended far beyond its immediate military objectives. For generations, Chinese civilization had defined itself in opposition to the barbarian peoples of the steppes. Agricultural against nomadic, civilized against savage, permanent against mobile. Now, the necessities of imperial defense required adopting the very characteristics that had previously marked the boundary between civilization and barbarism. The philosophical implications troubled many at court. Confucian scholars argued that adopting barbarian methods would corrupt Chinese virtue, while legalists countered that effectiveness mattered more than ideological purity. The debate reflected deeper tensions within Han society about the price of imperial expansion and the changes required to defend an empire that now stretched from Korea to Central Asia. The hunt began in pre-dawn darkness, with a carefully coordinated advance across the snow-covered valley floor. Unlike the ceremonial hunts of peacetime, this operation prioritized function over form. No elaborate rituals or musical accompaniments, just the efficient application of military tactics to the capture of strategic resources. The silence was broken only by the crunch of snow beneath hooves and the whispered commands of officers positioning their men for the decisive moment. The wild horses, when they finally appeared, presented a sight that would have stirred the heart of any cavalryman. Hundreds of animals moved through the valley like a living river, their breath steaming in the cold air, their winter coats thick and shaggy, their movements displaying the grace and power that made them so valuable for military purposes. These were not the refined horses of Chinese breeding programs, but the hardy steppe animals whose endurance and speed had made nomadic cavalry so formidable. The capture techniques employed by Wei Qing's forces represented innovations that would transform Chinese military capabilities. Rather than attempting to kill their quarry, the hunters used nets, lassos, and coordinated riding maneuvers designed to exhaust and surround the wild herds. The skills required, precision horsemanship, perfect timing, and seamless cooperation between multiple riders, were exactly those needed for effective cavalry combat. Huo Kubing distinguished himself during the main capture operation, personally accounting for the successful netting of over 50 animals through a combination of exceptional riding ability and tactical brilliance. His techniques, refined during this expedition, would later make him legendary as the general who finally broke Xiongnu power through campaigns that carried Chinese arms deeper into Central Asia than ever before. The philosophical observers who accompanied the expedition recorded their thoughts about the transformation they were witnessing. Master Liu, a scholar versed in the classical military texts, wrote extensively about the implications of adopting barbarian methods for traditional Chinese military doctrine. We have always prided ourselves on defeating our enemies through superior organization and disciplined tactics, he noted in his campaign journal. Now we learn to fight as they fight, to think as they think, to move as they move. In winning their horses, do we risk losing our souls? The question would prove prophetic. The successful adoption of nomadic military techniques would indeed transform Chinese civilization in ways that extended far beyond military affairs. Trade routes opened by cavalry campaigns would bring new ideas, new religions, and new cultural influences into the empire. The hybrid military culture developed during expeditions like Wei Qing's would eventually produce dynasties like the Tang, whose cosmopolitan character reflected the synthesis of Chinese and nomadic elements. The winter hunt concluded with the capture of over 2,000 horses and the development of training techniques that would revolutionize Chinese cavalry capabilities. But more importantly, it demonstrated that Chinese civilization possessed the flexibility to adapt foreign methods without losing its essential character. The empire that emerged from this process of selective borrowing would prove far more resilient than the rigid orthodoxies of earlier periods. As Wei Qing's expedition prepared to return south with their captured herds, the general surveyed the snow-covered mountains that had witnessed this transformation of Chinese military capabilities. Somewhere beyond those peaks, Xiongnu raiding parties were planning their next attacks on Han territories. But when those attacks came, they would face a very different kind of Chinese army. One that had learned to fight fire with fire, mobility with mobility, and nomad with nomad. The age of purely defensive warfare was ending. The horses captured in this winter hunt would carry Chinese armies into the heart of Asia, extending imperial authority across distances that would have seemed impossible to earlier generations. The hunt had become conquest, and conquest would become the foundation of an empire that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the deserts of Central Asia.